Hey everybody, this is Russ from Metro Game Core. I reviewed the AYN Thor about 4 months ago, and it's lost a little bit of its new car smell, so I want to do an updated review here today, just talking about some of the things I've discovered since making that initial review. And as you may have already figured out from the title of this video, it's mostly all positives. I just keep liking this device more and more, and it keeps getting new software updates and new apps and features that make it even better. It still definitely has some shortcomings, which we'll talk about in this video, but in general, it's been an overly positive experience for me. So grab your favorite snack and drink, and let's kick back and talk about some of the reasons why I think the AYN Thor is one of the best handhelds out today. Okay, I'm going to jump into this assuming you've already watched my impressions and review and other follow-up videos, which I'll have all linked down below. But if you're new to this whole thing, let's talk about pricing and availability. The Thor is made by a company called AYN, and they've been making handhelds for a few years now, but this is their first dual-screen clamshell. They offer 4 different specs. There is a Lite, Base, Pro, and Max model. The Lite model is being sold for $250, and this comes with 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage, and the chip is the Snapdragon 865. That's an older chip, but it still plays all of your retro systems, even Nintendo DS and 3DS fairly well, and it can also play a majority of GameCube and PS2 titles. For $60 more, you can get the base model, which comes with the same amount of RAM and storage, but with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor, which is much more powerful. This will open up more opportunities for emulation, including Switch and Wii U, and you can also play a fair amount of PC games via apps like Game Native as well. Personally, I think that the $60 price difference is worth it for the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, but obviously you do you. Now for an additional $60, you can get the Pro model with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of internal storage for $370. The increase in RAM and storage are not going to be significant when it comes to gaming, but one of my favorite things about this tier, which is the one that I bought my own AYN Thor at, is that this opens up all the other color options. The Lite and the base model only come in black, but these ones come in colors like white and rainbow, as well as a transparent purple. So the way I see it, if you're looking to get these colors specifically, this is going to be your entry point right here. And then finally, we've got the Max model for $450. This one comes with 16 gigs of RAM and a terabyte of internal storage. This is the model that I would recommend if you're really going to be pushing the limits of your device. That additional RAM will help when it comes to PC gaming via apps like Game Native or Game Hub, and having 1 terabyte of internal storage will save you money in the long run when it comes to microSD cards as well. Now, one thing to bear in mind with the Thor is that it is very popular. It is breaking out of your traditional handheld circles and actually going into mainstream channels. As a result, the company has not been able to keep up with demand, and so instead they've been doing pre-order batches, and we're currently on batch 3. This means that after you order the device, there's likely going to be a delay before it actually ships. And so right now they're saying that the shipments for batch 3 are supposed to start in March, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if you ordered right now that it would actually ship in March. It just means that it's going to start shipping in March. So worst case scenario, I would expect maybe a 2 or 3 month wait for your device, and then be pleasantly surprised if it comes a little bit sooner. So now let's talk a bit about the good and bad that comes with the AYN Thor, and most of this is going to be talking points I talked about in my review, but a little bit more of a mature perspective just because it's now been about 4 or 5 months. The number one thing that sets this device apart for me is that it is so small and portable and travel friendly. Every trip I've been on over the past several months, this thing has been my little companion. I take it with me everywhere. In fact, I already made a video talking about what it's like to travel with the Thor just because I love it so much. There are very few devices with this amount of power that also can fit in a pocket, and it's kind of a revelation that you can pull this thing out and then basically play any game you can think of on Android. That's another positive aspect for this. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is a bit of an older chip at this point, but it is aged so well. Basically anything you can think of on Android can be played with this little device. As far as emulating systems, your main limitation are going to be the systems that are actually available on Android, and most of them are going to be there, but there are some that are still a work in progress. PS3 emulation is not quite there yet, PS Vita emulation, Xbox 360, those are the ones that are still struggling right now, but everything else runs really well. Beyond the dual screen systems, which we'll talk about in a minute, one of my other favorite apps to play here is Eden, which is a Nintendo Switch emulator, which has been pushing out a lot of improvements and updates lately, and when you combine that with custom turnip drivers, there are a lot of games that you can play on here, and it's a lot of fun. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 does a very good job with performance as well, so as long as the game is compatible with this particular emulator and the chipset, it usually is going to be a very good time. I also recently did a video about this app, Game Native, which allows you to play your Steam games on Android, and the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is one of my favorite ways to play these PC games. Now, you usually have to stick to more lightweight titles, but if you really want to tinker and play around with it, you can get some pretty heavyweight games going too. But I think the star of the show is dual screen gaming, with the Thor in particular. After all, this is the feature that sets it apart from the pack. And even though the emulation experience is not perfect for DS and 3DS, it is very, very close. There are a couple drawbacks. For example, it has a little bit more input lag compared to the original console, and the touchscreen itself doesn't feel the same as it did on the original consoles as well. But I think the benefits far outweigh the negatives. We've got two OLED displays, which make the colors absolutely pop compared to the original consoles. Even if they're not a perfect aspect ratio fit for these particular systems, they're close enough for me. And no matter what model you get, you have enough power to upscale these games as well. I usually play them at a 4x resolution for both DS and 3DS on my AYN Thor Pro. And so I found that among the various types of games that you can play on the AYN Thor, it's the dual screen systems in particular, DS and 3DS, that really blow me away. Another thing I like about this device that I think just keeps getting better is the software experience. There have been a lot of updates for this handheld. Even when it first launched, I think the Android system here was pretty great. You could press the AYN button to bring up this bottom screen, which would allow you to do things like adjust the brightness and volume for either screen, or you can also go into the quick menu right here and adjust some things on the fly, like your performance profiles and so on. But since then, we've seen a number of updates to the operating system itself from the company already. If we go into the Android settings and go all the way down to the bottom to the Thor settings, we can see that there are some new options here. The first one is a built-in equalizer. The default audio profile of the Thor is one of the things that I thought was a little bit lacking with this device out the gate, and I love the fact that they've added an equalizer here. They've done a very good job setting this all up. And so I found that each of these profiles provide just a little bit of a different nuanced sound to it, but I prefer just making a custom one. And so this is the scale that I have set up here. I think that audio in general is a fairly subjective thing, so I love the fact that we can make our own customized profile beyond just the presets that they already have set up. Another update that is welcome is that they have included a charging limit, and we've seen this with other devices like the Retroid Pocket 6 lately. So number one, you can actually set this to only charge to 80%. That means that once it gets to 80, it's just going to stop right there. That's going to give you a lot more longevity with your battery because it's not topping it up all the time. You can also adjust the charging speed. By default, it will charge quickly, but you can also have it charge a little bit more slowly, which again will give your battery a little bit longer life. And then finally, if you're concerned about burn-in with the two OLED displays, for example, if you plan on having something static all the time on one screen, you have this new option here called OLED Screen Protection. By default, it's just going to be turned on already, but you can adjust it as well. So this is going to shift some pixels to make sure it's never really fully static, and then it'll also refresh the screen every 30 seconds as well when you're not touching the display. This is what the refresh is going to look like, so it'll do this every 30 seconds if you don't touch the display. You can always just tap on the screen to make it go away, or obviously you can turn it off in the settings as well. Either way, I'm happy we have these tools added. We can adjust the audio on it, we can adjust the battery charging behavior, and then finally we can make sure these screens are going to last for a long time. Another exciting thing about the AYN Thor is that software just keeps sprouting up. I think it's because it's such a popular handheld, more and more people are getting involved. Let's start by talking about our front end. So these are apps that will compile together all your emulators in your games to allow you to navigate through and make this feel more like an actual console. For years, I've been using Emulation Station Desktop Edition as my primary front end. This one's got a really nice look to it overall. There are a bunch of different themes for it. I've talked about this extensively. This app does have a couple accommodations for a dual screen device like the Thor. For example, it allows you to navigate through right here and then launch a game on the opposite screen. That can be great in many different ways. For example, you could use the top to scrape all of your artwork, which does take some time, but then play the games on the bottom screen instead. So you can play while you're doing your scraping. But there's also been an additional app added to the Emulation Station ecosystem. It's called ESDE Companion. It's made by one of the developers of the original app. So the way this works is this little app down below is going to look at whatever you're doing on your display and then pull some of the assets that you've already scraped and show them on the bottom instead. So as you navigate through your different systems, it's going to show you some random artwork from one of the games that are within the actual system. When you go into a system, it'll then show it specific to whatever game you're hovering over. And also, once you start up the game, this app will also show all of the artwork down below too. In reality, it doesn't do a lot for single screen games other than just remind you what game you're playing, and obviously you can use other things like the AYN quick menu instead, but it is nice to have a little bit of a colorful touch as you're playing your games. Another front end that I've been using a lot lately is one called Cocoon. I actually did a full review of this thing and a guide about a week and a half ago, and I'll leave that link down below as well, and it was made with the AYN Thor in mind. Now, as I showed in that previous video, it can be arranged to work with basically any system you can think of. So you can navigate through here, pick your system, pick your game, and so on. And so it's a really nice, colorful, and visual app to use. But I found with the Thor in particular, I haven't really wanted to put all of my systems within Cocoon. Instead, what I've been doing with this app is to make it more curated, where I'm actually just focusing on the games themselves. So this is my front page. When I open it up, it just shows my favorite games, the ones that I'm trying to play through right now. And so as opposed to picking a system and then picking my game, it literally is just showing all my games at once. And I've got it all set up here with basically all the systems that I'm probably going to play the most on my Thor. So mostly it's going to be DS and 3DS games, but you can see here, I snuck in things like a game native game right here if I want to actually play a PC game at the same time. So in general, I've just been limiting this to about like 20 or 25 aspirational games, those that I actually want to get through. So I'm kind of thinking of this as like my backlog app instead, where I'm going to go through here and be like, all right, I can only play the games that are on this list. What am I going to play next? As opposed to just browsing through like I do on Emulation Station. One thing worth noting that I didn't realize in my original review and I left in a pinned comment was that you can adjust the size of the icons by pressing the L3 button right here. So depending on if you want to see a lot of them all at once or you just want to see like a menu of just one at a time, you could do that. I found that 2 in general has been like the best mix for me altogether. And I should note that this is something I've been setting up on my other handhelds as well. For example, here's my Odin 3, probably one of my most played handhelds as well. And I've got Emulation Station on one side, so if I want to browse through my whole catalog right there. But then I can also just go into Cocoon, and this is going to have all the games that I'm actually trying to play through right now. And so it's just a really nice mix to be able to go directly into games from here, or I can just browse through the entire catalog with Emulation Station if I want to do that instead. So kind of got the best of both worlds. Now, beyond just front ends for the Thor, another thing I've really been enjoying is an app called Pixel Guide. So this is essentially going to allow you to add FAQs to this app that you can then use for a dual screen setup. So you can play the game up top and then have the guide down below. So let's say I'm playing a Super Nintendo game like Earthbound and I want to have an FAQ down below. What I can do is open up Chrome and then search for game FAQs and find that and get a walkthrough. But the Pixel Guide makes it a lot easier and it saves your spot. So when you have this opened up, you can go and hit the plus button and add a game. And then within that app, you will then search for the game FAQs, find one that you like, and then install it to your game. So as you can see, I've already got one guide installed for Earthbound, which I got through this app, and then I can go and just navigate right to it. It's going to save where I was, and now I can read the walkthrough as I'm actually playing the game. And so this is super handy. One tip is that if you are going to use this app, I recommend finding the guides that have an HTML format. They're going to be just a lot easier to use. They've got hot links. For example, you can just click on them, and it'll go to exactly where it is within the guide. And you can also go through the chapters and see the table of contents if you need to find anything specific. And so I found this just to be a better experience overall, and I like the formatting. You can also go into the settings here and adjust things like dark mode or adjust the font size as well. So a lot of things that you can configure with this one in particular if you use HTML. Now, to be fair, I have not been playing a lot of games like this. We'll talk about that later when I talk about what I've actually been playing, but I think if I was to play through Earthbound, this would be an ideal setup for me, just to make sure that I don't miss anything. And obviously, this can be done with a number of different games, basically anything that has a single screen and has an FAQ or walkthrough available, and that's going to be most games. And so I would love to play through Final Fantasy X if I had the time for it, and this I think would be an ideal way to do it as well, because it's been, like 25 years since I played this game, and I'm sure I would miss a lot of things if I didn't have it readily available right here. Okay, now let's talk about some shortcomings with this handheld. Number one is going to be just the ergonomics. This is something that hasn't aged super well for me. It's just a matter of this form factor in general. It is a relatively flat handheld, and as a result, yeah, it's kind of flat ergonomically. The ideal handheld experience for me is something that is horizontal, that has ergonomic bumps to it. Overall, I find this to be just a much more comfortable experience, but I don't think that this would work very well with a clamshell form factor. So it makes sense that something like the Odin 3 is a lot more comfortable to me than the AYN Thor. Now, there are grips that you can buy for the Thor. In fact, I made a video about these ones in particular. There's a whole cottage industry of accessories for the Thor that are coming out on Etsy right now. And so these will improve the ergonomics significantly, but they also do add to its bulk in general, so it makes it a little bit less travel friendly. For example, I wouldn't really be able to put this one in my pocket. So there are workarounds to make this device a lot more comfortable, but it will obviously make it a little bit bigger too. Another thing I'm not super hot about with the Thor are these face buttons. They still feel a little bit clacky and loud to me. I just wish they weren't quite so loud and just a little bit softer to press down in general. As I'll talk about in the accessories section, there are replacement buttons you can get, but personally, I just haven't felt that these are annoying enough for me to take the device apart and actually swap out the buttons. So I haven't done that personally, but there are some options out there. So I would say it's just a very small grievance in that I wish that these were just a little bit quieter. Another thing I'm not super hot about with the Thor is the all glass front that we have on the bottom. So I don't think this is actually necessary. It's nice, it makes it look like it has a bezel-less display, but in general, I don't think I would mind the bezels in the first place. The review unit that I had was a black model and it got very smudgy, and I think that the 16-bit and the white ones are much better in that regard. I really don't see the smudges anymore. So that's one nice thing about this color in particular, but I still wish that it was at least plastic on these sides. It almost feels like this device is a little bit more fragile than it needs to be because I'm always worried about all this extra glass getting cracked at some point. I also think that this much glass contributes to the weight. It's still not a very heavy device, but it could be a little bit lighter. And then finally, one other thing worth noting, if you are going to be playing some heavy-duty games, it gets quite warm as a device in general. Even when you put it at the highest fan, this thing gets pretty hot just because it is relatively thin and compact. It's just physics. Now, personally, I usually play it in standard mode with the quiet fan turned on, which means that you're not going to hear the fan ramping up as you're playing it, and it usually does just fine. Basically, all the way up through like Nintendo Switch Lite games and PS2, GameCube, I can play it with this preset, no issues whatsoever. Now, once you get into playing PC games, that can be more demanding on the system, and so in general what I'll do is I'll upgrade the performance to high performance mode, and then I will turn the fan up higher, either to the smart mode, which is just going to ramp up when it needs it, or the sports mode, which is just going to be at like a 75% tier. In general, I would say that I use these performance profiles less than I thought I would. For the most part, just this mode right here has been great for the vast majority of games that I've been playing. And I should also note that's one of the other benefits of using a 3D printed grip like this is that because you have this extra material, most of the heat doesn't actually make it to your fingers at all. And so this is a much more comfortable experience in that way as well. Okay, now let's talk about accessories. We'll start with cases, one of the bigger questions that I've been getting lately. Now, there are two cases available on their website. There's one that works with their official grip and one that works without it. And honestly, I have not been using a case at all with my Thor. This thing is a clamshell. It is meant to protect your device. Yeah, it might get a little bit dinged up, but over the past 4 months or so, I haven't seen any scratches or anything. I do baby my device very much so, but still, I chuck it in my backpack most days. Now, for a while, I was using the little foam insert that comes with the device when you first buy it, and this essentially was there to protect the device when I had it closed up, because there are these little gaps around the edges. I was worried about it maybe bending a little bit too much or getting some dust inside, but I found that in general, a couple times I forgot to use the foam, and it's been absolutely fine chucking it in my backpack like this. If anything, I've just been wiping it clean with a microfiber cloth when I first start playing it, and that usually is just fine. And so, yes, initially I was using this, and I still think it works really well if you're paranoid about it getting a little bit scratched up or bent, but in general, I found that the way I use it, it's been fine on its own. We already talked about grip options, but these are the ones that I have found to be the best for me in general. They've got a little stylus holder in here as well. I've got a whole dedicated video about these grips, so I don't want to belabor that point. I also made a video talking about styluses, but these are the two that I've been using the most over the past several months. There's an official one from Nintendo. This is for the Nintendo Switch. It's like $15 or so. And then there's this $20 one on Etsy that I really like as well. It's got this disc tip to it that doesn't look like it would be very good, but it works very well with these screens. And so this one has been my favorite. It's a nice small size, about the same size as a DS. I'll leave these linked down below. One of my other things I don't like about the Thor is that these triggers are a little bit sharp along the edge. I've gotten used to them, but there are solutions on Etsy right now that will fix this problem too. Somebody actually sent these over to me. They're 3D printed. They don't have a store or anything. They just wanted some feedback on how they felt, and I think they're great. But there are also some on Etsy that I'll leave linked down below if you want to try them out too. But they all work the same way. So essentially you just snap them in place and then they round out that edge on the side. And so they're really good. For this one in particular, I was helping him with the color grading. As you can see here, it's just a little bit off. It's really hard to get that right with this particular color with all the 3D printed options. So I would say these are not a necessary purchase. Instead, I would say if the triggers actually bother you, you've at least got these solutions on Etsy, and it's really handy that they have these things. It's pretty cool. It will make the device protrude a little bit more on these edges, but I think it's well worth it for that additional comfort. Another fun thing you can do with your Thor that I haven't really got into just yet are using decals. So there are a bunch of shops that are providing these additional decals to really customize your device. These ones right here are from a shop called Ziggy's Retro Corner, and these are relatively inexpensive. I think they're like $6 or $7 each, and so you can just use these stickers and slap them right on top. Of note, the background of these decals are actually clear, so it's not going to show up white on my tan device right here. Instead, it's just going to go over it. I would say if you are going to use a decal like this, it might be good to use the TPU case that AYN sells on their website. So the combination of these two, I think, would make a lot more sense, where you can put the decal on top of it, and then you could put this on top of it like this, and then it kind of looks more like an old school 3DS. And so for me, I think that looks pretty neat. Personally, I'm not a big fan of putting stickers on my device, but I think that by adding this case here on the top, it's going to add additional protection and it makes it look a little bit more cohesive. Another Etsy shop that is really good when it comes to decals and custom buttons is Sakura Retro Modding. Now, I don't have any of their decals, but some of these look excellent. They also have very high quality buttons that they make by hand, and they are quite expensive, but also very good. Speaking of buttons, I mentioned earlier that I haven't been bothered enough to actually take the device apart and put on new buttons, but I do have a couple that I do want to show off. These were made by a shop called Mithril Mods, and they sent them over for me to try out, and honestly, I just haven't gotten to them just yet, but I do think they are very impressive because they're magnetic. Let's take a look at their D-pad first. So it is a two-part mechanism. So you essentially would install this part onto your Thor itself, and then this is the magnetic part right here that you will snap on top. So once this is installed inside the Thor like that, you can then swap out different D-pads depending on what you want, and they've got a couple different designs, and they look really neat. These are 3D printed, so it's not going to have the exact same feel as like a nice plastic button, but I love the fact that we have different options in terms of colors and shape and look. They've got the same setup with their face button, so you would install this bottom part and then you're going to use a variety of different top buttons as well. And so these are all set so that they will go perfectly into place, and you can change them out. For example, you want to change out your ABXY pattern, or you want to use PlayStation glyphs, you can do all that. So I think this is something that I still need to explore in a later video because I love the idea of using these magnetic buttons, but again, I just haven't been bothered enough to actually swap out the buttons themselves. Let me know if you'd like to see a video about this in the future. Now let's talk a bit about how I've been playing the AYN Thor. I think my use case is going to be very different than most people just because I am a handheld reviewer. I'm always going through a constant cycle of these different devices. Even though the Thor has been a mainstay over the past 4 or 5 months, it's not the only handheld that I own. And so even though there are many games that I would love to play through, both 3DS and DS games in particular, I often find myself switching it around and seeing what other things I can do with the Thor. Part of this has to do with the fact that it's a dual screen device, which means that I'm constantly thinking of new ways that I can play things on this. After all, it's got 2 screens, which means it's double the opportunities to tinker around. And with the way that my brain works, that means that I'm often thinking about other things instead of the game that I'm actually playing. So as much as I want to play through some of these games, I often find myself just jumping around instead. To be clear, that's not necessarily a bad thing. After all, I'm having fun as I'm moving around different systems, but I'm just not really getting through my backlog on the Thor itself. Often when I'm done messing around with the different systems and settings, I find myself reverting to many of the games that I would play on any other handheld. It doesn't have to be a 2-screen one like this. So many times I'll just go back to play my favorite indie PC games on Game Native, which I could obviously do on a different device that's a little bit more comfortable to hold. There is a little bit of magic when playing a single screen game on the Thor. For example, playing Celeste and then having the Cocoon front end show, just a nice little graphic down below. All of this comes together very nicely. And of course, these are levels I've played through before, but it's always nice to have them on a new platform. Where the magic really comes for me is just playing through the stuff that I normally would play, but with this enhanced two-screen experience. I always go through and play the same levels in Mario Kart 7, and same thing with like New Super Mario Brothers. I just always play these same levels. I don't know what it is about me, but I don't really like advancing in these games, but rather perfecting the levels that I already know and enjoy. And in that case, a two-screen setup like this is pretty awesome. And so I think this is probably the most magical experience for me in my particular gameplay. I'm not getting through any new levels with the Thor right now, but I'm enjoying some of the games that I normally would play even more because it's got two screens. Yes, at some point I will probably get through Wind Waker HD, and I am thinking that I will play it on the Thor because I love seeing the menu screen down below at all times. It just enhances the overall experience with this particular Wii U game. All the same, the next time I check in and do an updated video about the Thor, chances are I'm probably going to say the same sort of things, that I'm playing all my favorite games, but really enjoying the two-screen experience of it all. And in the end, this is where the Thor shines for me, playing some of my favorite classics, but then also having that two-screen functionality, which just pushes me towards playing more 3DS and DS content, and it's been one of the best experiences I've ever played in emulation with these particular systems. The two handhelds I've been using the most over the past several months have been the Thor and the Odin 3. The Thor has been great in a more travel-minded capacity. I can just throw it like this, put it in my backpack, and then take it, and it's ready anytime I'm ready to start playing another game. The Odin 3 for me has been more of a couch-focused handheld. This is not necessarily as travel-friendly, but I do find it more comfortable, and so often I find myself gravitating towards this device as well. This is a handheld that keeps getting better as well, mostly because of updates to the emulators and GPU drivers. If I had to make a recommendation between the two, it's pretty hard and it really comes down to context. I think that if you're looking to play DS and 3DS games, then the Thor is going to cover that and then some. But if you're looking for the more comfortable experience and something that's a bit more powerful, then the Odin 3 is going to be a safe bet as well. Either way, I think that both of these are excellent handhelds. It really comes down to what you plan on playing. If you're looking for something a little bit more affordable, then the Retroid Pocket 6 is what I would consider to be a mid-tier champion for Android devices. This thing is $230 before shipping, but has the same chip as the AYN Thor, so same level of performance, but obviously with a single screen, and the screen itself is also a little bit smaller. It's 5.5 inches, but it also makes it a much more compact handheld. So this is something to consider as well. If you want to play something that's horizontal, this thing in terms of size and power is excellent as well. In the end, the Thor is an awesome handheld, and it has been getting better and better over the coming months, and so I still definitely recommend it if you're looking for a two-screen handheld. This is the one to beat. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Did you pick up a Thor? How are you liking it? Or did you order one? Are you waiting for it to be delivered? Or did you go with something else? As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. We will see you next time. Happy gaming.